The wind rolled low across the prairie, carrying dust and the faint smell of rain as Luke Marston guided his horse toward the old barn. The sun was sliding behind the ridge, painting the sky in orange fire, and the long shadows stretched across the ground like reaching fingers. It had been a long day, longer than most, but everything in his life had felt long since he'd ordered a bride from the northern highlands. A giant, the matchmaker had laughed, half serious. Luke had thought it was a joke, until she stepped off the wagon 2 days ago. Ilara stood nearly 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered, thick-boned, a woman shaped like the mountains she'd grown up in. Her hair fell like molten copper, and her voice carried the low rumble of distant thunder. She wasn't frightening, not in the way bandits or storms were, but in the way the unknown always was. The rancher had lived alone too long, and he didn't quite know how to act around someone who looked down at him even while barefoot. Tonight she had retreated to the barn, limping after helping him round up stray calves. He'd noticed the way she hid the pain behind her stoic silence. Luke wasn't heartless, and he wasn't about to let a woman, giant or not, suffer in quiet, so he followed. He found her seated on a hay bale, her huge frame hunched slightly, hair falling around her face. The barn lantern beside her glowed warm against the dusk, bathing her in soft golden light. For a moment he paused, watching. There was something fragile about her despite her size, something lonely, just like him. "Ilara?" he called gently. She flinched and straightened, wiping her palms on her skirt. "I'm fine," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "Just resting." "You were limping." "It's nothing." Luke stepped inside, boots crunching lightly on torn straw. "I ain't asking to pry, but I'd rather not have my bride getting hurt 2 days in." Her eyes flickered. She wasn't used to the word bride yet. Neither was he. "I just twisted something," she murmured. "That your ankle?" he asked. She hesitated. Lower. He noticed the way she shifted, the way her skirt pulled awkwardly at the hem. Something wasn't right. "Ilara," he said, voice low but firm. "Let me see." Her breath caught. She looked up at him with an expression he didn't expect. Wary, almost frightened. "No. It ain't anything improper," he assured quickly. "I'm checking for an injury, just an injury." Still she didn't move. She looked away, jaw tight. Luke exhaled and stepped closer, gentler this time. "You helped me today. Ran after those calves like you'd known this land your whole life. I ain't gonna let the person who worked beside me sit here hurting." Silence, the lantern flickered. Outside, cicadas started singing. Finally she whispered, "It's a rope burn." "Where?" She swallowed. "On my inner thigh." The calf's rope whipped around it when it bolted. "I thought I could keep walking, but it's deeper than I expected." Luke nodded. Slowly. Rope burns could get infected bad. "Ilara, open your legs. Let me see." He said it plainly, without a tremor of impropriety. But the moment the words left his mouth, he saw heat rise in her cheeks. Embarrassment, not shame. She was a giant, yes, but still a woman, still human, still new to this land where nothing felt familiar. Her hands lowered toward her skirt, fingers trembling. She looked like she wanted to vanish. "Where I come from," she said quietly, "we handle our own wounds." "Maybe that's why you came here," Luke replied softly. "So you don't have to anymore." The barn seemed to hold its breath. For a long moment she didn't move. Then with a hesitant, almost pained grace, she spread her knees slightly, enough for the lantern light to fall across a darkened length of skin just above her left boot. The burn was angry red, blistered, already swollen. He winced. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" he muttered. She shrugged, staring at the floor. "Where I'm from, showing weakness is dangerous." "I ain't your enemy," he said. She didn't answer. He knelt down, not close enough to touch her, not yet, and studied the burn. The rope had torn through layers of skin. It would need salve, clean cloth, maybe cold water first to ease the swelling. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. "You did good," he murmured, surprising even himself. Most folks would have cried out. "I wanted to," she admitted, voice barely audible. They both fell silent. The intimacy of the moment hung between them like a thread pulled too tight. Luke stood and moved to the small cabinet on the wall, grabbing a tin of herbal salve and a roll of clean cloth. "I'm gonna patch it," he said. "But you tell me if I hurt you." Ilara's eyes lifted to him, uncertain, vulnerable, searching. "Why are you being so kind?" "Because," he answered simply, You're here, and that makes you mine to look after. She inhaled sharply, not in fear, but something like relief. Maybe even trust. As he returned to her, kneeling again, he paused before touching her. Elara, you ready? Her voice was soft, resigned, and strangely hopeful. Yes, Luke. And as the rancher reached out with gentle hands, the giant bride who'd never belonged anywhere finally began to wonder if this lonely place, this lonely man might be different. The night grew deeper, folding itself around the ranch like a blanket. The lanterns inside the barn flickering as if the shadows were breathing. Luke's hands worked slowly, carefully, smoothing the salve across Elara's rope burn. Every movement deliberate, respectful. He didn't rush, didn't let impatience or embarrassment slip into his touch. It had been a long time since he had tended to anyone besides livestock, and even longer since he had let someone close enough to need his care. But Elara wasn't a burden. She wasn't an obligation. She was something else entirely, something he hadn't expected when he ordered a bride out of sheer loneliness. A presence that filled the empty spaces in his life without even trying. She sat still, her huge frame softening as the sting eased. Her breath, once tight from pain, slowed and deepened. Luke worked in silence, but not the kind of silence that made the air heavy. This one felt shared, comfortable, familiar somehow, even though they barely knew each other. You're gentle, she murmured eventually, her voice a low rumble. I'm trying not to hurt you. You're trying more than most ever did. Luke paused, meeting her eyes. Folks back home? Her lips pressed together. Men in my clan respected strength above all. If someone was injured, they were expected to fix themselves or be left behind. She looked away, the lantern light catching on the strands of her copper hair. A weakness shown was a weakness exploited. He frowned. Sounds cruel. It made us survive the mountains, she shrugged. But it didn't make us kind. Luke finished tying the clean bandage gently around her thigh. You're not in those mountains now. She looked down at him, something vulnerable flickering in her gaze. I know, but old habits, old fears, don't vanish just because I crossed a country. He stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans, then offered her one hand. Even standing, he barely reached her shoulders. Let's get you inside. It's cold out here. She blinked at his hand as if no one had ever offered one to her before, not sincerely, not without expecting something in return. After a moment of hesitation, she placed her large, calloused palm in his. He braced for the weight, but she lifted herself lightly, careful not to overpower him. When she stood to her full height, the barn seemed smaller, the rafters lower. She towered over him, yet her expression was almost timid. You good to walk? He asked. Yes. She shifted her weight, then winced slightly. Not the sharp pain of before, but the sting of new healing. Better than before. Good, lean on me if you need to. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth. You're too small to hold me up. Luke grinned. Try me. Her laugh, quiet but real, echoed warmly through the barn, and something in his chest loosened. Something that had been tight for years. They stepped outside together. The night air was crisp, touched with the smell of sage and the distant promise of rain. A few stars blinked overhead through the shifting clouds. Luke walked close beside her, not guiding her, not leading her, just staying near. He kept his pace slower than usual, matching her careful steps. She noticed. You keep adjusting for me, she said softly. Well, you're new to the land. Wouldn't be right to rush you. I'm not used to anyone slowing down for my sake. Luke looked up at her, his voice gentle. Then you're overdue. They reached the porch. The lantern beside the door glowed warm against the wood, casting long, stretched shadows behind them. Luke held the door open without thinking. Elara hesitated only a second before ducking inside. She had to bend her neck slightly to clear the frame. The cabin, though sturdy, was not made for someone her size. But she moved slowly, mindful of not knocking into anything. You hungry? Luke asked, stepping in after her. She shook her head. No, I'm tired. More tired than I want to admit. He nodded. There's a cot for you upstairs. It should hold. Reinforced it earlier. She blinked in surprise. You prepared it? Well. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Figured you needed something sturdy. Didn't want you falling through. Her gaze softened. Thank you. Luke pointed toward the stairs. Go on, I'll put out the lamps. She turned away, her steps heavy but steady. The wooden stairs creaked under her weight, but not alarmingly. Still, when she reached the top landing, she paused and looked back down at him. "You didn't have to help me," she said quietly. "Yes," he answered without looking up. "Fiddling with the lantern wick, I did." "Why?" The lantern flame dimmed, then steadied. Luke let out a slow breath. "Because nobody should hurt alone," he said. "Not anymore. Not here." She was silent for a long moment. He almost wondered if she had gone into her room, but then her voice drifted down, softer than he'd ever heard it. "Luke, when you told me to open my legs earlier, I thought you meant something else." He froze. Heat rose to his cheeks. He kept his eyes on the lantern. "I meant the injury," he said carefully. "I know that now." Her voice trembled slightly. "Not from fear, but something more fragile. But no man from my homeland ever asked to see a wound without expecting to see more." Luke finally looked up at her. "I ain't them." "No," she whispered. "You're not." Their eyes held across the dim room, across the stairs and silence between them. Something unspoken moved there. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of it. Something rare, something tender. "Good night, Alara," he murmured. She lingered a heartbeat longer. "Good night, Luke." She disappeared into the upstairs room, leaving the landing empty. Luke finished dimming the lamps, his heart unexpectedly full, his loneliness strangely lighter, replaced by a cautious, growing warmth he hadn't felt in years. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the cabin walls like a giant hand. Upstairs, Alara lay on the reinforced cot, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since she'd left her mountain clan, she wasn't afraid of closing her eyes. For the first time, she felt safe. And for the first time, she wondered if the man downstairs might just be the beginning of a life she had never dared imagine.